This is the Tapped In Podcast, the podcast for beverage distributors that want to empower their sales team to drive business results. Listen up and welcome back to another episode of the Tapped In Sales Podcast, your podcast for beer distributors by beer distributors. I'm your host, Bud, here with Mikey. Mikey, how are you today, my man?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good, too. We also have new guest, Ian Dominguez, all the way from Miami by way of New York. But Ian and I have gotten to know each other a little bit. And today's podcast, we're going to talk all about the THC beverage market. Mikey, we're a couple knuckleheads. We've been talking about this a couple times, but we really don't know what the hell's going on. Ian's actually in the space day in and day out working with THC beverage makers in the THC drink space. So, Ian, how about you introduce yourself? Thanks for joining us today, and we're excited to kind of dig into the more details and the nitty-gritties of what you're seeing in this market from your world.
It's all about the details. Thank you, Bud. Thanks, Mikey. Happy to be on the show. So yes, I'm the founder of Delta Emerald Ventures. We are an investment fund that invests in the cannabis and now THC drink industry. I think an important thing to note, first on my background, I've spent basically my whole career investing in consumer packaged goods. That's whether anything that's sold at a grocery store or liquor store, this is my world. I became very bullish on cannabis about 10 years ago, and I became bullish on THC beverages about 2 years ago. And I actually didn't believe in this category when I first got started in this industry for a lot of reasons. The primary one was that these products just didn't sell well in dispensaries. So it's just like, okay, what am I going to do with this then? But that has changed massively in the last 2 years. And now we have a framework that can allow these low-proof THC beverages to thrive in mass retail. And that's what we're really bullish about.
Love it. That's awesome. So your Delta Fund or Delta Ventures, you're doing direct investments into businesses in the THC world, right? You've got a couple different funds running. What was fund number one?
Fund number one was a $50 million fund. And there are 22 investments in that vehicle. And the way to think about it is 60% of our capital went towards cannabis technology companies because we think that's where a lot of the value accrues in cannabis. To put it in a beer distributor's lingo, your audience would be familiar with Encompass or VIP for sure. It's definitely VIP. And so that type of workflow, if you think about how difficult would it be to switch a platform like that, that same type of thing exists in cannabis, whether you're at the dispensary level or you're further up the supply chain. So we really focused on technology. What's changing with the second fund is we're still very bullish on cannabis technology opportunities, but THC beverages are taking a very important part of the second fund.
Got it. So when you get into that second fund, now you're really leaning into your kind of where you cut your teeth in the industry of investing and running funds, which is CPG and all those consumer products and getting back into that world. So when you think about the market potential of THC, what do you get excited about? Like, why has it changed from, hey, I'm interested in flower or I'm interested in cannabis from a decade ago to now Ian is dedicating his, professional time and life towards the THC drinks world?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One is that we already know that, and some of your audience might not like to hear this, but the cannabis industry looks like it's going to be...
We tell them things that people don't like to hear all day long. And people still listen to it.
People, it's good to hear. And it can breed debate, right? So one of our views is that the cannabis industry in total is going to be larger than the alcohol industry. So you're talking about $270 billion in the US. And we have some specific examples of that. But a really important part and thing to remember about where we are in this industry is that the cannabis industry has kind of been spinning its wheels, placating, for lack of a better term, the stoner audience. If you walk into a dispensary, there's a lot of high potency products. And based on our data, I can tell you that a lot of those dispensaries are reliant on the really high potency customer spending like $400 a month on their cannabis products. The problem with that is that you have kind of built an entire machine just to placate this one kind of stoner customer base. When it's really the heavy user, but the big number, the in terms of the big TAM, it's for the lighter user. But the light consumer has not really engaged as much with the cannabis dispensary as a retail node. And what we're learning with these THC beverages is that when you make this product tested, age gated, and quality controlled, when you make these products available in a retail setting that the consumer is more used to, they buy it hand over fist. And that's what's getting us a lot more bullish, is that where cannabis got us to this point, but hemp beverages are what's going to really cause this industry to roof it.
That's awesome. Yeah, like Bud said, we're just a couple knuckleheads that always talk about this, and we've had quite a few episodes on it where we're just, we're talking about what we're seeing. We don't have the data behind it like you do to support it. But you just spoke to a lot of things that we've been speculating on, as far as the high potency. Walking into a dispensary has a totally different feeling than walking into your neighborhood, liquor store or convenience store. So we've kind of speculated that that's the way the market is shifting, and that there is a lot of potential. I mean, when you're talking about now, we've shifted over to just beverages primarily, right, in these convenience stores. What do you think? How big can just the beverage THC get?
So yeah, we think, and we're not the only ones that believe this, but we think that beverage will be the biggest category in cannabis. So if we say that at maturity, cannabis in total is a $300 billion market opportunity in the U.S., we think at least half of that will be cannabis beverages.
Wow.
And that same view is also held by, I'd say, the largest publicly traded cannabis company called Curaleaf. Has said this multiple times on their earnings calls, that they see this same opportunity. And you're right that the potency aspect, or we would like to call it proof, the low proof is a super important part about this. And actually, if you pull out your history books to alcohol, we have a playbook to go by, which is when we exited out of prohibition, we said 3.2 beer, sell it everywhere, because they wanted to eradicate the black market and make that product at lower potency available anywhere that you're used to shopping. And with liquor, higher proof, then you have a special store in most states that you go to. And this is how we think it's going to play out in cannabis, where mass produced beverages at low dose is available anywhere beer is sold, likely distributed on beer trucks. But if you want to get a higher potency product, then you got to go to a special store for that. And I think that's totally reasonable. And in my opinion, that's what we want. We want to encourage moderation here.
Yeah, you definitely don't want a high potency getting in the wrong person's hands for the first time.
That's right.
Yeah. When Michigan went legal, what is that, Mikey? Maybe like 5 or 6 years, quite a while ago now, right?
Yeah, for recreational. Oh yeah, it's probably been close to 7 years, I would think.
Okay, so we were like a year into this, Ian, and I've got some friends staying over at our place for the weekend, and we're doing a member guest golf tournament, and I'm telling the girls, I'm like, you girls won't go to a dispensary. There's no way you're going to go to the dispensary. I'm trying to do reverse psychology because I want some gummies, but I'm not going to leave the golf course to go get them. And we show back up after 2 9-hole matches, and there's a package of gummies sitting on the counter, and I scoop those suckers up. I cannot believe they actually went to the dispensary, because to your point, that whole unit of business is built to a different clientele. And our wives would not be the person who would go in and shop in that. And I tell that story to kind of tee up the conversation around, like, where do you see this being accretive? Like, there's a group of beer distributors, probably half of them. There's half of the group that see this as extremely dilutive, or that they're going to steal, the if we think about dollars, this category is going to steal dollars from recreational funds that the consumers have. And then there's the other group that is like, we see this as accretive, not as dilutive. And when I say accretive, additive, those are words in one and the same for the listeners out there. So how do we look at this as where somebody like my wife would never want to step foot or have to be challenged to go to a dispensary? How do you see this business playing out, or this category playing out in an additive world for retailers, for beer distributors, for the people listening to this podcast, really?
Yep. So a couple points on that. First, I'm going to give, I just recently heard the founder of Athletic Brewing do a podcast, and he had the same question that was constantly asked. And some people just would immediately hang up the phone when he was trying to tell them about non-alcoholic beer. And his point, which I think is also rings true here, is that it's not about people just completely stopping drinking. It's more common to see somebody that just adds this as an option to things that they consume. And where we see that, women, you're right, are one of the most, I think, attractive customer bases for this product category specifically, because for one thing, they have been difficult to get into those dispensaries. That is accurate. Dispensaries seem to underperform there. When you think about the opportunity for the trade, there's a few things I can share. First of all, just to put it into hard numbers, we think that THC drinks are growing at a 60% 10-year CAGR. And we are seeing in Minnesota that case velocities are already on par with craft beer, but they're selling at up to three times the price at retail. So there is a margin dollar opportunity there for the distributors, absolutely. And the same is true for the retail trade as well. We're seeing in Tennessee, for instance, liquor stores carrying these products are getting up to 70% gross margin on these products. So there's a gross margin lift that comes with these products. And in terms of, is it cannibalistic or is it accretive? Look, the thing is, the consumer's already making these decisions. So what is so unique about the beer distributor landscape is that your audience has the opportunity to partake in this upside. It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game, is what I'm saying.
Nice. Yeah, we see the same thing when we're out in the trade, that you're grabbing net new consumers.
Yes.
And net new. I don't know if this is 100% a fair assessment, but like, I'm not a soda drinker and never have been, but I am addicted to LaCroix and spice. My niece calls them spicy waters.
Yeah.
And all the carbonated waters. So like you take this through, and this is a way that I would think about it if I was running a beer distributor still. You go back through the sugar wars and the sugar tax wars of the late 90s, early 2000s, and the CSD operators realized that they had to do something different. They had to start to innovate around this. And they did that at the supplier level. And one of the innovations that came out was all these spicy waters and all these new, carbonated waters that had flavor in them that were easy to drink. So now I'm buying those at $3 or $4 a 12-pack, and I'm a new consumer into that CSD category that had never joined it until like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yep.
And I still view this as like there's this new opportunity for a consumer to join the alternative beverage or mood alternating beverage world through the THC drinks category that is downplaying the amount of alcohol they're drinking, or has not joined the party if they're a young drinker and has not joined the alcohol drinking party at all.
Yeah, I think it's about new occasions. There's a good way to think about it. And I'll give you one example. There was a research report recently, I think it was put out by Tinder, where they asked people that matched, they surveyed a lot of their users and say, where did you meet when you actually met in real life? And I think it was years ago, the most common answer was a bar. But now it is like a running club or things that have a more active aspect to them. And so we have to understand that people are meeting in different places than they used to. And some of those occasions aren't as appropriate for alcohol, like a running club, for instance. But cannabis very much can satisfy a beverage need in that type of occasion. Another example is for retirement communities. Actually, we're seeing big orders take place, group orders to a liquor store, where one person in a retirement community is buying for all their friends, and then they're shipping to the retirement community. So that group might not be drinking as much these days, but they're still looking for something to have a little bit of fun, or maybe some relief, any number of things. So it really is about increasing the occasions that are available to beer distributors, but the entire beverage industry.
Speaking of like occasions and new occasions and shipping to, I mean, it's interesting shipping to a retirement home, right? Because Bud and I talked about it a couple of times, where you're kind of tapping into a whole new consumer base. Somebody that wasn't already drinking our products, whether they were NA or alcohol based. So, I mean, you've done a lot of research on this. All we've done is speculate. What does that consumer base look like now? And what does that consumer base look like in 3 or 4 years when we actually have these THC infused products readily to purchase at any convenience store across the country? What are we looking at?
So this guy, it's like this guy's been on some THC drinks. He's ready to rock.
Yeah,
He's ready to rock and roll.
Today, what we're hearing is it's a 30-year-old or older female is the most common. And then if you think about what other products were they buying before, at first, if you look at Minnesota as the initial, we were hearing a lot of, well, maybe it's a replacement or additive to a craft beer basket. But now that is moving into white wine and red wine. And it's hard to tell with, a high noon or something, because there's underlying growth there, whether or not there's also, but very often these transactions will contain an alcoholic product, say a 6-pack of beer, and THC drinks. We see that quite often. It's relatively more rare to see only THC drinks in the transaction, but there are instances where that does happen. One more thing I do want to bring up about Minnesota, because it's important to note how this all kind of got started. Minnesota now has been in business with THC drinks for about 2 years. And we actually recorded our own video with one of the largest liquor store chains, Top 10 Liquors, 16 stores in Minnesota. And the owner of that business would tell you that in only 2 years' time, they've gotten to 15% of sales for their entire store are these products. That gives you a sense of how quickly, once we make this product available, the consumer does pick it up. And there are some beer distributors that think that it's going to be 30% of their business in not too distant future.
And that's
Is that by dollars?
That's in dollars.
That is in dollars. Okay.
I'll give you, and this is another important thing to think about from a SKU count perspective. That same owner will tell you that the THC drinks part of his business has now surpassed red wine as a program. But the difference is that THC drinks can deliver that type of performance with 300 SKUs versus 3,000 SKUs for the red wine program. So simply, it's not just about the velocity, but it's also about your space constraints and how efficient this category has been so far.
Now, quick follow-up just on the Minnesota piece, because I spent some time in Minnesota, and yeah, it's everywhere, right? But that's also a state right now to where in the same shelf, I can see a 20, a 50, a 2.5, and a 3, right? So a lot of that growth that you're talking about, is that mostly coming from the lower dosage? Is that where you're really seeing like kind of pull away in the market?
So the 10 milligrams, I believe, is the cap in Minnesota. If it's not yet, I think it will soon be, but I need to check that. What we see is that between a 5 milligram and 10 milligram and a 2.5 milligram, the 10 will tend to sell better over time. I think that's still maybe the consumer looking for value for money. We think that as this industry scales, what we want to do is push some pricing down, because we think that there actually could be more demand at that 2.5 or 5 milligram level. But I think you need to maybe offer the customer more value for that SKU relative to a 10 milligram.
The cautionary tale of the consumer right now in that 10 milligram is like, if we keep as a category hunting for that high dose user or that heavy user, and we keep only offering products to them, people like my wife will never join the category because they'll
Yep.
never have anything that's the right amount of dose. That's when Mikey and I talk to clients that we have about, what the dose should be or what the potency should be per unit or per can. That's why we think it's 5, 2.5, definitely below 10, definitely 10 and below for sure.
Yes, we're there with you. For context, the investments that we've made, none of them produce something north of 10 milligrams. We think that that's plenty. And if you talk to, say, a restaurateur or a live venue owner, they want more sessions, so when we don't want to be giving a one and done experience. We really want people to crank a few of these and enjoy that over the course of a night.
Yeah, it's like selling a 10%.
Beer.
10% beer brewery where you have nothing under 10, 7. I mean, they're all high, big beers. You go in there, you have 1 or 2, you're done. I'd rather go in there and give you more money and drink 5 beers at 4%.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to mention just about the nature of the growth here. So Minnesota is your kind of perfect storm in a good way. If you look at Tennessee right now, Tennessee has been, most liquor stores are carrying, I think I was recently at a conference and literally every single member of the Tennessee Wine and Spirit Retailer Association that I met is carrying these products. But it's interesting that they have not hit that 10 or 15% bogey in about a year and a half. They're more sitting at like 3% of sales. And we don't exactly know the full explanation for that, but we do think that Minnesota benefited from a lot of earned media about this, because as it was happening, the news agencies were really all over it. In the case of Tennessee, it just hasn't been as widely known. There's a lot of people that are still very surprised that they can buy legal THC from their liquor store. So I think it's a slower build, but in my opinion, when you look at alcohol, you want a slower build. Mick Ultra is a slow build. Craft beer, take your pick. You've seen a lot more kind of quick growth and then decline. And when we think about this category, this is not like craft. This is like a Mick Ultra if Mick Ultra was its own category. We think that this is going to be a slow and steady build that is getting us to these parity, at least, with craft and or red wine in the next 10 years.
So you've been bullish on beer distributors and how they can ultimately win this category. And we've got kind of really 3 distinct, maybe 4 in some markets, but we've got beer distributors doing direct to store. You've got wine and spirits doing direct to store delivery, and you got your CSD, your carbonated soft drink folks. And then if there was a 4th category, you would throw like the big food distributors in the mix too, right? Like they're doing some beverage stuff too, particularly on the non-alcoholic world and the kind of energy drinks. Out of all those players and all of those route to markets that own their own little channels and their own little ways, what makes you most bullish on the beer distribution channel or beer distribution team as being what you think is a clear winner to service this category?
Yeah, so a few things. One is that beer distributors are in the business of regulated products that requires age gating and quality control that it fits very naturally in that context. And the other is just the channels that beer distributors do best. So convenience stores are a key potential opportunity here. If you look at Minnesota, it really started in liquor stores. If you go now to Chicago, again, started in liquor stores, then it moved into independent grocery. And we think that next leg of growth will be convenience. Now, not every state is necessarily going to have that opportunity. And that really comes down to who's lobbying for what, right? Yeah. So in Tennessee, we've seen a pretty effective move by the liquor store constituency to keep it with liquor stores. They don't want convenience stores to get this product. Now, if you turn to Texas, it's a very different notion. And I guess my expectation is if we do have positive legislation in Texas, it's also going to include convenience stores as a channel because the folks in Texas, I'm from Texas, there's some powerful folks that are interested in being able to carry this in convenience. And that's not just the beer distributors themselves.
Got it. You're from Texas? Where are you from in Texas?
Houston.
Houston, yes. Love that. That's awesome. Little Texas boy. We've lost the whole Texas twang, and you've gone full Miami.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, if you get a couple beers with me, the Texas twang can come out from time to
Go
time.
back up.
Yeah.
Challenge
You haven't picked
accepted.
up any of the New Yorker yet either.
Yeah, that's right.
In New York. Oh man.
Speaking
So-
of retail, let's talk about channels, right? When we talk about the future of retail and different channels, are channels handled differently, right? What channel do we see succeeding on premise, right? Is there on premise opportunity? Obviously, Minnesota's dabbling with on premise, and they have some kegs, some tapped THC products, right? So,
Yeah.
I guess by channel, like what channel is going to succeed? How do we handle them differently? And then also flavor profiles too for each channel, right? Because I've sampled everything from a seltzer to a soda, to any iced
Yeah.
tea. I mean, everything. Where are we going with this in retail?
Great
we
question.
obviously have a flexible drug testing policy at VXP.
Well, I had the NA version, but for sampling purposes, they do a fluid, right? And you could probably speak to this, Ian, but they do a fluid without the THC in it, so that you can actually sample them. So that's the
Non-dose.
version that I had, but don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Well, the question is, what are we testing? Not are we getting drug tested? It's what are we testing?
What are we testing?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Amazon has stopped testing for cannabis because they literally couldn't hire people to work in the warehouses if they were to do that. Home Depot is the most recent group to announce that they are no longer going to be testing for cannabis. My hope is that maybe the guys on the forklifts are still going to be tested because, it feels a little dangerous, but, I'm sure they've figured this out. In terms of, product and flavor profiles, there's a couple things I want to mention. Flavor is critical, and we're learning that outside of our little world of THC drinks, and we're seeing that in FMBs and so on. I think from our view, the liquid really does matter, and the current landscape of brands in this space, north of 100 of them easily, not all of them have expertise in producing great liquid. And so we think that you're going to see some wheat separate from the chaff in this sense. And just to give you an example, if you're just doing a seltzer and just throwing THC in it, our view is that that's going to be a little bit difficult to maintain in terms of a competitive set. You really need to bring something else to the table in our view. And as far as some of the brands that we've invested in, one of my favorites, Trail Magic, they produce a half and half, like an Arnold Palmer, that is phenomenal. These guys are former cider guys based in Minnesota, so they know flavor very well, and so it really shines in the actual liquid itself. But I want to give love to all of our family, also Flyers and Wonder. The three of those have in common. One of the things they have in common is really, really good flavor. So that is going to be a really important element here. The consumer is still in trial mode right now. We are seeing some evidence of consumers then attaching to a certain SKU, but on average, most consumers are still in the surprise and delight, whoa, I can buy this in a liquor store kind of experience. We think it'll take time until they really kind of develop a certain taste and preference the way you might see in beer.
So the big takeaways there are flavor is important. If you're a beer distributor looking at getting into this or already in it, what are your thought processes for how should they be reviewing and thinking about what brands to partner with and considering, the method of the madness is kind of locked in and really easy with beverage alcohol. We know the game. We know what the consumers are looking for in our individual markets. We know our market, but this is a whole new thing. It's a brand new game for us. So any kind of advice or feedback around how to go about,
Absolutely.
vetting partners.
Yeah, so that is our job. So first of all, pick up the phone or email me. You want to talk about our views. Our job is to diligence these opportunities from an investment standpoint. And distributors making an investment as well when they bring these brands on. I've spoken to a lot of distributors that are at the phase one, I'd say, or just kind of thumb in the air. Let's just collect a bunch of brands and see what works kind of thing. I do see more sophistication coming though. And one really important part about this, what to look for, is QA, QC, quality control and assurance, and a verified supply chain. So it's not just about the brand and that team and their growth and go-to-market strategy for your market. It's also about what steps has that brand taken. Are they cutting corners, or are they the real deal, focused on making sure that the product is what it is and is testing the way that it should? And I do want to call out one of our portfolio companies called Vertosa. That is a leading supplier of the active ingredient that is used in these beverages. Think about it like a formulator, helping with flavors and things like that. So what's great about a company like that is that when you it's almost like Intel Inside for a computer. It's a stamp. It doesn't actually exist on the can, but the point is that a product that has Vertosa as a input, you can rest assured checks every single box all the way up the supply chain, that you are carrying what you should be carrying, and you're not carrying things you shouldn't be in terms of THC that came from cannabis and not hemp, as an example. So compliance is critically important here, and I know it's important for your audience. So it's not just about the flavor, it's not just about the team, it's about the types of steps that they've taken to ensure your business remains profitable and doesn't run into any issues with this.
Yeah. That's the biggest fear that clients have and beer distributors have at the end of the day, is that we've got a lot of our family resources and wealth tied up into, the business that we run, and operationally every day we have that federal basic permit that we're connected to, and the risk is losing that in any way, because that's one of the 7 deadly sins for immediate termination. Do not pass go, do not collect, $200, and you move on and, lose your operational rights. So that at the end of the day, like operationally, is the biggest fear. Looking, now we're post-election, looking to 2025 and beyond, where do you see the regulation method to the madness moving in the Trump administration and all the stuff that's going on at the FDA and the TTB and all that good stuff?
Yeah. So I've had a lot of time to reflect on this. My TLDR, too long didn't read. THC beverages and medical cannabis are looking like they're going to have some smooth sailing ahead. What we want is regulations. We want clarity so that the beer distribution community, those that have not yet made this choice, this decision to get in, give them the comfort that they can get involved and really embrace this category. Also, the new administration, we think, is going to lean heavily on a states' rights kind of platform in general. And the way things are playing out right now is that this is really a state-by-state game. If you take Florida, for instance, Florida voted against adult use cannabis, but hemp is open for business, as is medical cannabis. So this is kind of the way that we think at a large scale. Adult use cannabis is a little bit in the penalty box, to be honest. It failed in multiple states this last election cycle. So we don't think the Trump administration is going to go out of its way to hand adult use cannabis a win. But we do see reason to believe that hemp products, specifically hemp beverages, are going to be in a very good position.
Awesome. Are you seeing any beer distributors that you're working with get involved in the regulation process at a local level?
Absolutely. Across the board.
And how is that being, we talk about be at the table, not on the menu. That was our message to clients. So how is that, from your vantage point, being received by regulators and legislators?
Based on what I've heard, let's say, take the state of Florida, it's gone very well. These are distributors. One of the great things about them is that they're real stewards of their community. And I think they carry weight at a local level and at a federal level. So the work started really at a local and state level, but now we're seeing coordinated efforts for this low potency or low proof category at a national level. And I want to give a special call out to the Coalition for Adult Beverage Alternatives. It's a great organization, and it also includes a major beer distributor that you all probably know, Steve Economos at Eagle Rock. So they are, I think, making great progress at a federal level to make sure that we get what we're hoping for in terms of sensical regulations on low-proof THC beverages only. And so, yeah, that's kind of a new development on a national scale. And the other thing to call out about Caba is that their lobbyist is the same lobbyist that the Wine and Spirit Wholesaler Association uses. In fact, the WSWA had to give approval for this lobbyist to be used by Caba. So they're fully on board with this.
Is that Diane's organization? Did we
That's
meet?
right.
That's right. We met her, or I got to meet her with you earlier this week at
Yes.
Beer Marketers Insights. Awesome.
She
awesome.
lives in
She's
DC
great.
too. She's a fantastic representative for our category.
I think that's a big part of, if you're not paying attention loosely, you can see the market is moving from people who are dealers and back alley, behind the scenes, trying to avoid the law man, and moving into a professional management world where you've got more people that are, hey, we're trying to do this right. These are the things we want to get through. To me, that's the big behind the scenes kind of infrastructure transformation that's happening over the last 15 years, where it's like, hey, the medical marijuana community is like, they're the old school of like, should just be a plan, and like, this is no big deal, and like, we just want to, the hippies of the first generation, and it's moving to a much more business centric, business professionalized team that is moving these projects forward. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I'll give you one example on that. Is so I'm close with a publicly traded tobacco company. This company has a head of cannabis already. And I spent some time with them this summer, and we spent most of the time talking about THC beverages. And we were in a pub, and we had a couple beers, and I was like, well, I'm confused. Help me understand this. Why have we been spending basically all this time talking about THC beverages? Shouldn't you be asking me about flower? Like, you guys make cigarettes. Like, why wouldn't you be looking at combustion products as well? And I said, Ian, you misunderstand us. We've been spending billions of dollars to try to get people to stop combusting tobacco. And the only reason that we are able to continue doing what we do is that we remain in the good graces of regulators in that effort. So for us to go make an investment in a flower brand in cannabis would be completely antithetical to everything else we're doing. But beverage is unique in this way. And so their focus is on beverage as a category.
Interesting. So you're telling me there's no hope of seeing a menthol pre-roll, right? Because that just scares the shit out of me.
You actually can. If you're in California, I'll give a shout out to one of my favorite cannabis brands, Pure Beauty. They do actually have a menthol pre-roll.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I was at deer camp, right? It's hunting season here in Michigan, so I was with 10 of my good buddies in the woods, and that conversation came up with what you were just talking about with that supplier, and we were joking about that. Yeah, give me a pack of menthol pre-rolls, please.
Yeah, they've got them.
Yeah, interesting. So coming, last couple episodes and coming off of NBWA out in San Diego, all the talk is the on-premise is coming back, right? I mean, on-premise has been struggling. It's been hurting since COVID, and trying to build it back. And I think back to also the NA beer, when NA beer really started exploding, was about the time when it was legal to recreationally smoke marijuana, primarily West Coast. And I remember trying to sell NA beer to on-premise places, and they were like, that only works out West because you could smoke a joint and go outside of the patio, smoke a joint, and then have an NA beer. That's how those breweries are surviving. So I guess my question to you is, bringing THC beverages into the on-premise world across the country, is that going to help on-premise? Do we see a consumer for that? Is that the savior, right? Is that going to help us out?
Absolutely. We already have kegs in certain states, are THC drinks on tap, and also singles also being sold on prem. We think it's going to be a huge lift, not just for bars, but also restaurants where you're seeing, let's say, maybe a slight reduction in the high margin sales of alcohol. So not only does it kind of pad the income statement there, but we do think that it's going back to providing the consumer another option. And I will say that, if you go to the Florida Panthers Stadium in Florida, there is already a concession built for THC beverages.
Wow.
So we are pushing hard on this space. The one blocker right now is insurance, but that is also being solved too. So what we are seeing happen is insurance policies that tack on THC beverages to an alcohol insurance policy for on-prem. With that in hand, you're able to sell these products safely from a business standpoint. And then you're just if you take, say, Nashville, for instance, you see very good performance on-prem, but it does require to be responsible with this. I mean, a bartender is expected to not overserve a customer in the first place when it comes to alcohol, but it does raise interesting questions about, let's say somebody drinks 10 drinks, alcoholic drinks in one bar, shows up to the next one and has one THC beverage and then drives home and hits somebody, God forbid. Who's at fault there? We haven't had court cases yet to actually lay that out. And we really need that in order to for the insurance companies to better price that risk.
Well, that's that.
Not saying that we want that to happen, but in the
Right.
eventuality that court cases happen, it actually will help bring clarity to this.
Yeah, that's that DUI, driving while intoxicated or was it DWI, right, Mikey?
Yeah, DWI,
Right?
intoxicated.
Yeah. That whole, where it's like this, in the 30s or in the 40s and 50s, it was, in 60s, it was like, you're drunk, you've had too much to drink. And then now it just become street legal drugs, and then prescription level drugs, and now legal cannabis or legal THC drinks. And there's just so many things in people's bodies like that now.
Yeah.
And it all just gets buried into one charge or one process that you're impaired. And I look at it as I think alcohol gets a pretty bad rap from that, because that's a simple test to do the BAC, but people have more than one thing going on in their system around this more often than not. That's a mix of prescription drugs. It's a mix of alcohol. It could be a mix of THC too. And you kind of have to find a way as part of testing out of this too. Like, how do you start to tag different instances where people have multiple of these substances in the system when they do things wrong? Because data will allow us to actually see what are the challenges and what are the opportunities for improvement. But if they all just get tagged at alcohol, we get a bad rap as an industry too. It's
possible to be impaired from pills, even like sleeping pills and things like that. I know that there's cases like that. One thing that is, I guess, maybe more bad news to give is that, chemically speaking, if we go back to like chemistry from middle school or high school or whatever, the THC molecule is a fat, is not a water soluble molecule. So the problem with that is that you can't detect in the same way through breath that level of impairment, if you want to say. So it is going to be very tricky to be able to set a certain limit when it comes to testing in the field. There have been companies that have tried to do this. Our view is that it is functionally impossible to do from a chemical standpoint. Yeah.
From the science mind, it is just impossible.
They have drug
at least from
experts.
Even if you did a blood test, it doesn't. A blood test wouldn't necessarily give you a level of impairment. It might say yes, THC is in the bloodstream, but it cannot necessarily tell you how impaired someone is. And two different people might have a different level of impairment from, say, a 5 milligram beverage. So that gets into discussions about tolerance as well.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Yeah, right now it's all handled.
Well, I think that.
Go ahead, Bud.
Go ahead, Mikey.
I was going to say, through a drug recognition expert, DREs, usually each department has one or two, and they're just highly trained to recognize if you are currently under the influence of drugs and what drugs, but they're expensive to train. They're expensive to hire. There's just not enough on the streets right now. Go ahead. Bud.
Well, Ian, we covered a ton of ground today. I really appreciate you for coming on the pod and talking about in detail everything from size of the cannabis industry, how it's going to grow or what it's going to continue to grow, what's going to take it to continue to grow, and then finishing out with some of the science corner on, hey, how do we actually maybe test for this in the field as well? I had not had anybody say that, science wise, we think it's functionally impossible. So that's new news as well. Ian, if people wanted to get in touch with you, how do they reach out? How do they find you? What should they be thinking about? Or how, you've got a newsletter. Obviously, you want to talk to people. You're raising money for your fund. If they're looking to get interested and invested in this space, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So feel free to reach out to me. You do id@deltaemerald.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. We have a ton of THC beverage content on our website, www.deltaemerald.com. We've got a button there for THC drink research that we've published. And then the last thing I'll note is, yes, we are working directly with beer distributors. I'm always happy to speak with anyone in beer distribution. And we also have a conference coming up in February called CanadaDataCon. And definitely check that out for your audience. If anyone wants to attend in person, shoot me a note and we can chat about it. It is an invite-only thing, but we're going to have a heavy-hitting list of alcohol retailers, alcohol distributors, cannabis, hemp beverages, tobacco. Hoping somebody from the FDA, we'll see, but we're it's going to be a great conference, February 6th and 7th.
That's awesome. Good stuff. Well, thanks for joining us, Ian. You rock. Mikey, as always.
You guys rock.
Appreciate it. Yes. Next time we'll have to be trialing something together, Ian.
Ooh, that would be,
Absolutely.
That would be really That'd be an interesting show. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Totally.
Yes.
Totally. Thanks for your time,
thanks,
guys.
sir. Thanks, boys, and cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.